Let's look at a third area, our emotions. See, a lot of us have grown up in a culture where it's not okay to have emotions. Well, let's take a look at what we might call a healthy approach to your emotions if you want to have high self-esteem. Because if you feel bad about your feelings, that lowers your self-esteem. We teach people a process called the total truth process. It's a process in which any feeling you have, you need to express in a way that doesn't hurt other people. But we find that feelings come in groups, and that what you need to do is you need to express 5 or 6 layers of feelings. The first layer is what we call anger. Whenever you're upset, there's usually anger inside of you. And again, in our culture, it's real hard for women to do that. When women get angry, what do they usually do? Cry. And when men get sad or hurt or scared, what do they usually do? Either withdraw or get angry. Okay? They either pull away or they slam the door and go off, you know, that kind of thing. And so we kind of wired up to express them differently. But anger is usually at the top. And underneath all anger, there's usually hurt, sadness, and pain. And underneath the hurt and the anger, there's usually fear and self-doubt, feeling of insignificance, or I'm incompetent, or I'm unlovable, something's wrong with me. And underneath the anger, the hurt, and the fear is usually what we call regret and remorse. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Or taking responsibility. And I'll give you an example of all this in just a second. The fifth level is I want. Underneath all anger, there's some want that got frustrated. Something you wanted you didn't get, or afraid you won't get. And then finally we have what we call forgiveness, understanding, appreciation, and love. Maybe give you an example of how this might work in your life. I remember a time when my dad was trying to get me up to go to school in the morning, and he yelled down, "Jack, are you up?" And I said, "Yup." He said, "Don't hear any feet moving around down there?" So I took one foot out of the side of the bed and I hit it on the floor a few times like that. He said, "Okay." Then I rolled back and went to sleep. He comes down about a half hour later expecting to see me up and ready to go to school because I went to school in a carpool. And if I was late, that meant he usually had to drive me. So he saw me asleep and he got really angry. And he came into my room and he basically hit me a few times. Now, I used to go around for years complaining that I was an abused child. Okay? But let's see how I might heal that experience using this total truth process, this total experience of emotions. I might say to my dad, "I'm really angry at you because you hurt me, you hit me, and I'm angry. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that to a kid." And I would express my anger. "You dumb son of a gun. How could you possibly do that?" And I would rant and rave for a minute and let that out. Underneath the anger is the hurt. I'd say, "I'm really hurt. So you would do that to me, Dad. You know, I was just a little kid and you were hitting me and beating me up and I'm hurt that you would do that." And I would share the pain that I had in my body and that I felt, and the sadness and the crying that I wanted to do. And underneath the hurt is the fear. "Dad, I'm really scared of you. And I was afraid you were going to hit me and beat me up. In fact, I remember when you used to drink, I used to be always afraid, is he going to blow up again? Is he going to hit me?" And I was afraid. Here's this person that's supposed to protect me and make me safe, and you were scaring me. And then maybe the self-doubt in there. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm the kind of kid who deserves to get hit. See, and a lot of people become resigned to that. And then the regret and the remorse. This is where I have to own my piece. See, was I a total victim? No. Okay? I wasn't a total victim because I helped set it up. If I hadn't lied to my dad, would I have gotten hit? No. Now, it'd be nice if you could lie to your dad and still not get hit. Be better parenting, perhaps. But the fact is, I was not a total victim. So I would say, "Dad, I'm sorry that I lied to you. I'm sorry also that my mother came running into the room and started yelling at you." This was my stepdad, see, and she was yelling, "You never liked my kids as much as your own," and blah, blah, blah. And I remember smiling inside, going, "Yeah, get him, Mom." You know? I might also say, "I'm sorry you had to work so hard, 2 jobs to make ends meet, Dad. And I'm sorry you were frustrated. I'm sorry you didn't have the skills you needed to be more centered and more effective." Next, underneath, I'd say, "Dad, all I really want is for you to love me. I want you to hold me. I want to feel safe with you. I want you to care for me. I want you not to hit me when you get angry. I want you just to talk about it. I want you to know that I'm just a little kid and kids make mistakes and I was tired. I'd played football the night before and I was wiped out." And then forgiveness. "Dad, I forgive you for hitting me." Understanding, compassion. "I know you were frustrated. I know you didn't want to have to drive me to school. I know you were afraid of being late for your own job. I appreciate you for being my dad. Appreciate you for working 2 jobs and working hard. And finally, I love you." See, See, now if I take and I go through all those levels, I can complete any past negative event, and I can let go of the emotions. And as I learn to express my emotions, my self-esteem goes up. I feel good about me, and I feel alive because I feel my feelings inside. We've had people in our seminar where we'll break people into pairs, and one person will pretend that the other person is their father or their mother or their past husband or whatever, and they will do the total truth with them, and they'll spend 5 minutes in each segment yelling and crying and talking and saying I want and forgiveness and so forth. And I've had people report to me that after the seminar, colitis that they'd had for 8 years disappeared because they had all these spasms and tension in their stomach and in their gut. Another guy had a migraine headache for 2 years, couldn't get rid of it no matter what medication he used. Finished the total truth process, the headache went away, hasn't come back since, because he was holding all that emotional tension in his body. So I want to encourage those of you listening to this to do that kind of experience, to do the total truth anytime you're upset. And if you don't feel comfortable saying the words, write what we call a total truth letter and write the words down, write the paragraph. And you don't have to send the letter, you can burn it when you're done, but get it out of you. You know, we're working with ourself. There's a little process we go through, and it's called awareness, acceptance, and expression. And we have to first be aware of ourself, aware of a judgment we might have, or aware of a part of ourself that we might reject, or aware of a part of ourself that we disown. And then, after we become aware of it, then the next process is to accept it, to just accept that that's the way we are, and to be okay with that. And then finally is to learn how to express that part of ourselves in a way that brings it completion. And I talk a lot about rejected and disowned parts of ourselves. Like when I was a kid, let's say my parents were very strict in terms of sexuality, and so I grow up thinking that if I'm sexual, that I'm a bad person. So I reject that part of myself. I pretend I don't have it. I might even become celibate, not out of a true desire to be a spiritual person, but out of a need to not be bad, see? Maybe I've got a part of me that's funny, and when I was a kid, I made a joke, and my dad didn't like it, and so he sent me to my room, and then I decided, well, it's not safe to be funny anymore, so I lose my sense of humor. So we have parts of ourselves that we do, that we express, like being late or eating too much or being judgmental. And I call those rejected parts because I do them and then I feel bad about them. A disowned part would be a part of me I don't even express anymore. It's like totally subterranean. I've locked it inside of myself. And in order to have high self-esteem, to be a whole person, we have to re-own these disowned and rejected parts of ourselves. And the main thing is to realize that underneath every aspect of our being, there's a function, a purpose, a valuable contribution that this part of me can make. What we need to do is we need to accept every aspect of ourselves because it's who we are. And someone once said, you may as well learn to love yourself because you're going to take yourself everywhere you go. You can't take a vacation from yourself. So if there are parts of me I judge, I need to learn to love those. Another thing I want to talk about in relation to emotions are two negative emotions that have to do with guilt and resentment. Guilt and resentment. And so what I want to do is teach you how to get rid of guilt and resentment in your life. Guilt is the result of having a belief about how you should be and then having your behavior not match that belief. I had a guy in a workshop. He had been in Vietnam, and he wasn't able to make eye contact with anyone in the group. He'd look and he'd look away instantly. So I had him come up to the front of the room, and I held his head with my hands, and I had him look into my eyes. And he did that for about 5 seconds. He started to close his eyes. I said, no, keep your eyes open. He kept his eyes open. About 30 seconds later, he started to shake. He started shaking more and more violently. You could see this fear and terror, and then he started to cry, and then he collapsed into my arms, and he sobbed for about 10 or 15 minutes. Didn't stop. Finally, I said, what was that all about? He said, every time I look into somebody's eyes, I see the people I killed in Vietnam. He said, I was a point man in the Marine Corps. The average life expectancy of a point man was about 2.5 months. You usually get shot. You're the guy out front, first guy to come around the corner. And he said, more than once in hand-to-hand combat with a bayonet on the end of my gun, I would stick that bayonet into someone's stomach and literally, like less than 3 feet away from my face, watch their eyes and that look of disbelief as they died right in front of me. And he said, I felt guilty about that ever since. And I said, In order to feel guilty, you have to have a belief about how you should be that doesn't match your behavior. What was your belief? He said, well, my belief was good people don't kill people. And then he said, I killed at least 15 people. Now, the way to get rid of guilt is you've either got to change your belief or change your action. Okay? So if I believe that it's not good to have affairs and I'm having an affair, I can change my belief and say it's okay to have affairs, or I can change my action called stop having affairs. Don't have any more in the future. But can I change my past actions? No. See, he can't go back and unkill those people in Vietnam. He can't unsteal the money he stole from the grocery store when he was 15. See, you can't undo the past actions. So if you want to get rid of the guilt, what you have to do is let go of the belief. So he decided he would change his belief the following way. Good people don't kill people, except when they're 18 years old in a foreign land at war with another country and people are trying to kill them. See, then he said, you know, under that condition, I guess I had the right to save my own life by killing someone else. Now, does that mean killing is great? No. It simply means that in that situation, he could reframe it and say, okay, I'm going to let go of that belief and hold that I'm a good person. See, this guy that killed these people in Vietnam, he was not living a happy life for himself. He wasn't a good person to be in a relationship with. He couldn't be intimate because he couldn't make eye contact. He felt bad about himself. He certainly wasn't helping anyone in Vietnam by feeling guilty. Wasn't helping anyone in America. Wasn't helping himself. So he had to let go of that. Now, what he did do, by the way, is he decided as a way that he could help balance that action is he started working to raise money for the adoption of Asian children whose parents had been killed during the Vietnamese War. So you're always doing the best you can with the awareness, skills, and information you have to meet your needs. You never could do anything different. See, try to do something different from what you're doing right now. You can't. You can only do what you're doing. And you can only did what you did. You couldn't have done anything different. If you could have done it, you would have done it. People say, well, I knew better. You might have known better, but given the pressure that was on you and the needs you had and the skills you had and the courage you had and the information you had, you still couldn't have done anything other than you did. So the key here is to forgive yourself, change your beliefs, and let go. John Enright says the only function of guilt is to maintain the belief that you're a good person in the face of actions that deny your belief about what a good person is. So you get to maintain your self-image about being good in the face of acting out of sorts with that. And the fact is who you are. So give yourself permission to be that. Resentment works the same way. When I resent somebody, like for calling me a name, being late, playing their stereo too loud, it's because I have a belief about how they should be that they're not matching. I have a belief about how the world should be, and the world doesn't match my image. How many of you have ever resented the traffic? Did it ever make the traffic go faster? Did it make you feel worse sometimes? You get all tightened up, you know? I mean, the traffic is the way it is. So if you don't want that feeling inside of feeling, you know, uncomfortable and uptight, it's called learning to accept the world the way it is. Learning to give people permission to be who they are. And the other thing I found is I give people permission to be who they are. I give myself permission to be the way I am. I give myself permission to own that part of me. Sometimes when I see someone that's getting what I want that I'm not willing to risk for, I resent them for having it so I don't have to confront my unwillingness to take a risk to get it. And again, it's a self-esteem issue because if I thought I could do it, if my self-confidence was high enough, then I wouldn't need to resent them. Let's look at the next function here real briefly. It's called the body. The body. In order to have high self-esteem, you have to relate to your body. Number one, you have to love and accept your body just like it is. I don't know about in Chicago, but in LA Magazine, in the last issue, we had 17 pages of ads for plastic surgeons. 17 pages. Some of them full-page ads that sell out at about $5,000 a page. Now, what that tells us is a lot of people out there don't like the way they look. They feel inadequate. They think somehow they've got to look different to be attractive. You know, if I go and have liposuction, if I go and have a tummy tuck, if I go and have a facelift, if I get my nose changed, my eyelids, which are all black and drooping, I'll get those lifted up and the color changed and so forth, then I'll be acceptable. But I think what's critical when you're running out and doing this stuff to your body is where you're coming from when you do it. Are you coming from a place of, I'm not okay the way I am, I'm not it, so I've got to go and do all these things so I'll be acceptable? Or are you coming from a place of, I'm a wonderful person, and just like maybe using makeup to enhance myself, I'm doing this to make myself even more beautiful, to make myself even more an excellent vehicle for my spirit, as my body. But I see a lot of people who've had lots of plastic surgery, and it's all out of this sense that I'm not okay the way I am. Somehow I'm afraid that if I look a day over 30, I won't be valuable anymore. We really have to look at our body and realize our body's fine the way it is, and not come from the position that somehow I'm not okay. Because when you live your life from the context with your body that I'm not it, this isn't it, no matter what you do, whether you get thin, have a nose job, whatever, you're still holding the context, this isn't it. So we've got to learn to love our body and appreciate it and accept it just the way it is. For me, growing up, it was my chin. I used to have this belief that I had a receding chin and it wasn't okay. And I used to go to bed at night hitting my chin like this. I'd hit it with my knuckles, trying to build up a calcium deposit. Because literally I discovered that when you hit on a bone, it builds up a calcium deposit. I hated my face so much I would do that. But I grew a beard for 17 years. I had a beard covering up, and I would trim it in such a way that it looked like I had a big, strong jaw. I'd let it grow down, and I'd trim it back at an angle like that. And I remember my wife, when she met me, I had this beard, and then about 5 years into our marriage, I shaved my beard. She freaked out. She said, there ought to be truth in packaging laws. Said, I thought I married this man. You look like a cross between a little boy, E.T., and a chipmunk. Now, fortunately, my self-esteem was high at the time, and I was able to weather that. And we have to learn, ultimately, that our body is not our looks. One of the most powerful things you can do in terms of coming into a greater loving relationship with your body is something we call the nude mirror exercise. And what you do is find the largest mirror you can, like a full-length mirror that might be on the back of a door, or maybe your large bathroom mirror, and stand in front of that mirror and start at the top of your head and go all the way down to your feet, one part of your body at a time, and just notice anything about your body that you judge. Perhaps you think your nose is too big, or your hair is too thin, or your breasts are too big or too small, or your hips are too wide, or your legs are too fat. Whatever it is that you judge about yourself, just notice it. Just acknowledge that to yourself. See, because you've already been doing that all along. Now it's just time to bring it into awareness. And after you've made a list and you're really clear what those things are that you judge, then go back and take each part of your body that you judge and place your hands on that part. Like for me growing up, it was my chin. So what I would do is I would put my hands on my chin, and then I would send light from my heart down my arms, into my hands, into my chin, and I would visualize that light as a healing energy going into that chin. And then I would say the following words: please forgive me for judging you. I really love and appreciate you. I need you. And then talk about what the function of that part of your body is. For my chin, it would be, without you, I wouldn't be able to talk. I wouldn't have a jaw. There would be no teeth in my mouth. So I appreciate the fact that I can eat food and that I can talk. And I want to thank you for being there. Then I might have judged my stomach as being too big, and I can say, I love you. I appreciate you. So you haven't always looked like I thought you were supposed to, but I want you to know that I love you just the way you are, and I'm really grateful for you. And I would go on like that. I've had people tell me in our workshops when we assign that as a homework assignment that for them it's been one of the most powerful experiences of their life. They really start to feel loving toward a body that they might have judged since they were 14 years old. So I strongly recommend you do that as soon as possible. And you may want to do it more than once. How many of you have noticed as you've gotten older that your body has changed? Any of you notice that? Yeah, wrinkles and less hair and maybe a little overweight, and all the skin gets a little bit more grainy and less smooth and so forth. And that's just part of what happens. But I've talked to a lot of people who are older, and some of you in the room can relate to this, that when you get older, you don't realize it except when you look at your body. How many of you have that experience where like maybe you're 50 or 60 and you still feel like you're about 20? Yeah, a lot of hands go up in the room. Because the essence of who you are doesn't change. Your body is just a vehicle to carry you around in, okay? And as it changes, you're still the same. I teach kids and I teach adults that it's like you're a gift in a package. When you get a Christmas present or a Hanukkah present, you usually don't save the wrapping, you throw it away. You keep the gift. And so whether your body is black, white, brown, yellow, old, young, thin, fat, doesn't matter. What matters is who you are inside. We start using our body like a car. We use it to get around in and do our life in. Most of us don't spend our time at car shows comparing our car to the next guy's car. And we need to give up comparing our body and start loving and nurturing our body just the way it is. I saw a quote once that said, if you treat your friends like you treat yourself, would you have any? And I think about not only emotionally, but physically. You know, we abuse ourselves. We don't get enough sleep. We eat food that's not nutritious. And what we need to do is to make sure we nurture our body by putting good things into it, and also nurture it in terms of relaxation, meditation, exercise. But those are the kind of things I'm talking about with exercise, touch, listening to relaxation tapes, listening to relaxing music. Very, very powerful things to do for yourself. Another thing I want to talk about in relationship to body and self-esteem is breathing. I'd like to teach you a breathing technique. Now, many of you may know this, but we find that hundreds and thousands of people don't. And that's simply the difference between what we call chest breathing and stomach breathing, abdominal diaphragmatic breathing. They did a study. They went into a hospital ward, a cardiac ward, where they had 143 heart attack victims. And what they noticed is that none of them were breathing with their stomach. They were all breathing in their upper chest. They find that heart attacks are often associated with stress, which is associated with chest breathing. What we know is that the blood vessels that go through the lungs, 80% of the vessels that really take in oxygen are in the lower part of the lungs, not up in the top. So when you breathe up here, you can't get enough oxygen into the bloodstream. So when you're relaxed, you breathe down in your stomach. Will Schutz, who's very much involved in body work and in self-esteem, says you can tell a person's self-esteem by how deep they breathe, because oxygen is energy from the universe that supports you. And if you don't feel like you're worthy of support, you won't take in much air. And if you're worthy of support, you'll take in a lot of air because you deserve to be taking in a lot. So what I'd like you to do with me for just a moment is I'd like you to place one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest. Now, if you're driving a car as you're listening to this, just place one hand on your stomach, keep the other one on the steering wheel. Now, what I want you to do is to breathe, and I want you to take that hand that's on your stomach and push it out as you breathe. As you inhale, you're filling that up like a balloon. And then as you exhale, pull that stomach in. And do that a few times. Long, slow, easy breaths, and then exhale, feel the stomach going in. Inhaling, feel the stomach go out. One of the things I recommend is every day, maybe in the morning or in the evening, just take 5 to 10 minutes and concentrate on breathing into your stomach. That can relax your whole system. The last psychological function I want to talk about in terms of self-esteem right now is your intuition. So we've got our thoughts, our imagination, our emotions, our body, and our intuition. And we all have this little voice inside of our head that talks. Sometimes it's heard as a voice, sometimes it's more a felt sense. See, haven't you had that kind of experience where you start thinking about somebody and 2 days later you get a letter from them? Or you're thinking to call someone and they said, gee, I was just going to call you. How did they know? How did you know? We've all had that experience of knowing something and not quite knowing why we know, we just know we know. I've read numerous reports of mothers waking up at 3 in the morning and saying something's wrong with my oldest son. And then they get a call like 2 hours later their son was in an automobile accident on the way home from work or something. So we know that there's a way of tuning in. In order to have high self-esteem, you need to trust that inner voice. See, most of us as little kids were told not to trust. What do you know? You're just a little kid. And you began not to trust your own feelings. You began not to trust your own intuition. If you ever had the experience where you're about to go out to work and a little voice says, take an umbrella, and you look and the sky's blue and you go, forget it, no way. And you go to work and sure enough, you're coming home 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever, and it starts to rain. How did you know? See, somehow you knew without knowing how you knew. We've got to learn to trust that. Let me tell you a couple stories about how that's affected people in business. One of the most famous stories is about Conrad Hilton, the Hilton Hotels, and he wanted to buy a company called the Stevens Corporation, which was going to go to the highest bidder in a closed auction. And he submitted a sealed bid for $165,000. He awakened the next morning, and he had the number 180,000 in his head. Couldn't get it out of his head. So he changed his bid. And it was right at the last moment. He changed the bid, and he secured the property, which brought him eventually $2 million in profit. The next highest bid was $179,800. See, and if he hadn't raised his bid, he would have lost. But when you have that little inner voice inside, it's called start trusting it more. Now, the problem becomes, is every little inner voice in your head your intuition? You know? And the answer is obviously no. My experience has been that when it's your intuition, there's a sense of peace, there's a sense of rightness. There may be a little fear because you're going to have to do something scary, like say something to someone that you might not normally say, because your intuition says do that. But there's not a sense of like terror, and there's not a sense of like upset, and there's not a sense of like greed or grasping. It's just a clear sense. I have another friend named Bert Dubin, and Bert's a real estate investor out in Los Angeles. He's also a public speaker. And Bert told me a story once that he was sitting by his fireplace at home, and Bert meditates a lot and has done a lot to develop his intuition. And all of a sudden, he heard this little voice in his head, and it said, "Go to Kingman, Arizona." And he said, wait a second, what could this be? And it was 11 p.m. And he thought, if I go to Kingman, Arizona now, I'm going to get there at 3 in the morning. That doesn't make any sense. So he decides to go to bed and wake up in the morning, like at 3 or 4, and then drive to Kingman. So he does that. Now you have to realize he's been trying to buy property in Kingman for over 1.5 years. Can't find, there's just no four-corner property for sale. And whenever it comes up, he's always aced out because he's in LA. Now he doesn't know why he's going to Kingman. He just knows I'm going to trust this little inner voice. So he goes to bed, and he wakes up, and he drives there, and he gets into Kingman at 8 a.m. He pulls into this little Howard Johnson's where he normally goes to have breakfast or coffee. And he gets a paper out. He's sitting there at the counter having a cup of coffee, reading the paper. And he notices that there's a 4-corner property for sale. It's valuable property, a store. And he goes to the real estate office where it's listed. So he gets to the real estate office at 9 a.m. They open the door. He goes right in. He says, "I saw the ad. I'd like to buy this piece of property." They had it in escrow by 9:15. Now, he said, "How come this property wasn't bought up by people up here?" He says, "Well, let me tell you the story," the real estate agent said. "Let me tell you the story." He said, "I got a call yesterday, and the guy wanted from New York to sell the property. And it was like about 3 o'clock. Now, at 4 o'clock is the last time you can get the classifieds in. So I thought I'd put, the classified in the paper. And this morning I would call up all the real estate agents, and I would, let them know that the property was for sale." And he said, "Obviously, no one saw the paper. It came out at 8. You saw it first. You bought it. You have it." All because he heard this little voice says, "Go to Kingman, Arizona." He had no understanding why to go, but he trusted it. He followed his intuition. And Bert's told me 3 or 4 stories like that, where he's heard a little voice, "Don't make an offer yet. Don't do this yet. Do that. Sell the boat. Don't sell the boat." And turns out there's always some reason why he should have waited, and he did. So begin trusting that little voice inside. The way to build time into your life for that little voice is you have to have quiet time. Time to walk on the beach, take a shower, run, be with yourself, meditate. If you don't have quiet time in your life and you're always busy, going, it's very hard for that little voice to get in because there's so many loud voices all around. So make sure you do that for yourself.
This is the end of Side 5. Please turn the cassette over to begin Side 6.
What I'd like to do at this point is begin to focus on what we call the 10 steps to building any kind of success you want into your life. Remember we said self-esteem is I am lovable and capable? ILAC? So we've been focusing a lot on the lovable part, learning to say loving thoughts to ourselves and think positively, use affirmations like I am lovable and capable, and no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. We focused on loving our emotions, loving our body, trusting our intuition. Now I want to look at the capable side of ILAC. How can we become more capable? How can we become more successful? And these steps that I'm going to teach you apply to every area of your life. They can create business successes, personal successes, social, emotional, spiritual, humanitarian, global, political, doesn't matter, any area of your life. Now, step one is called acknowledge and complete the past. And there are three areas we need to look at with this. The first one is psychological completion. The second one is healing the negative past. And the third one is acknowledging the positive past. So let's start by looking at psychological completion. In order to understand this, you need to know that everything in life, if you want to have completion, has to go through a cycle. And the cycles are choosing to do something, starting to do it, continuing to do it, finishing it, and then acknowledging that it's done. And you can get screwed up on any one of those steps. You can never choose. Like I meet people that they can't decide what to do with their life. They're 45 years old and they're still trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. It's as if they're waiting for 12 doves to fly over their house in the sign of a cross. You know, at the moment they have the right idea, so they'll know this is ordained and this is the right thing to do. But usually it's not like that. You just have to pick. And once you pick, you got to start. So a lot of people choose things and plan them, but they never do them. Or they start, but they don't continue. Or they continue, but they never finish. Or some people finish and they never say, I did it. It's done. It's over. Completed. Now the problem is when you don't complete things, either with people or projects, a book you're writing, expressing your emotions, whatever it is, you end up with what we call attention units that aren't available. Now what do we mean by that? You only have so many units available in your brain, if you will, this is kind of a metaphor, for attention, to attend to a task. And if I've got something hanging out with Anita called someday we'll play tennis, but we've never played tennis, and I told Jim I'd return his tennis racket, but I still have it, and every time I walk past it I see that. And I told Ann that someday we'll have to finish that article we started. And I tell someone else that, you know, someday we'll come over and we'll have a picnic. And I haven't done any of these things. And then I've got a basement full of incompletes. The toaster that I never fixed and the clothes that don't fit that I was going to give to the Salvation Army. Well, all these things that I haven't completed are taking my attention. They're like little hooks in my brain. They've all got things hanging on them. I can't take those hooks and attach them to some new project. So what I want to do is clean up those past incompletes, so that when I come to a new task, whether it's to work or a relationship, I've got all of me available, or as much of me as possible. So let's look at some of the kind of things that you need to do to have psychological completion. I'm going to give you some homework to do as soon as you finish listening to this tape or after this seminar. I want you to write these down if you're in a place where you can do that. The first thing I want you to do is anything at all in your life that's broken. Broken toaster, broken watch, broken earrings, broken plate, anything that's in the basement, in a drawer, in your closet that doesn't work, either fix it or give it away or throw it away. Because every time you see that, it takes up energy. See, it's incomplete. It takes up space in your house, in your apartment, in your car. So anything that's broken, fix it or throw it away. Give it to the Salvation Army, but get it out of your space. Number two, any clothes that you haven't worn in the last 2 years, with the exception of things like tuxedos and ball gowns that you may only wear once every 3 or 4 years, again, throw it away or give it away. Another thing is to balance your checkbook. Oh, no, please, Mr. Bill. Balance your checkbook. File the papers. I remember at one point when I started getting into this, I had 6 banker's boxes full of unfiled stuff. That was my to-file box, right? Some of the boxes were 3 and 4 years old. I had never gone into them. I didn't even know what was in there, but darned if I wasn't sure, someday I might need it, right? It's called either forget it and let it go, or file it so that it's available and out of that state of like incompletion. Another one is clean out your office, your drawers, your files, your basement, your garage, your attic. Either pitch the stuff, have a tag sale, garage sale, yard sale. Get rid of it. I remember once I had a credenza behind my desk, And there were all the magazines I hadn't read from 1976, and then all the magazines from 77 and 78 and 79. And what I realized was all of my incompletions in my life come out of a low self-esteem position. I don't throw the magazines away because I think there's something in there that if I knew I would be more. And that somehow I'm not enough, and if I knew that, then I'd be enough. You know? I went to one man's office once as a consultant. Come into the office. I still can't believe this. I walk into the office. There was literally nowhere to sit except one little chair and another little chair, and everything else, piles, bills, invoices, bills of lading, journals, unanswered correspondence. The desk was piled up. There were piles of things on the floor. It was amazing. And I said, this is really a mess. How can you work in here? He says, well, not very well. He says, but this isn't really my office. And I said, well, where's your office? He said, well, my office is so bad I can't even go in there anymore. He had literally collected 4 years of stuff that never got filed away. Then trying to concentrate in that kind of environment is impossible. See, and we say when you sit down, you should have a clean desk. And when you look around, there's nothing else there. So if you've got stuff that you want to remember, put it in a file folder called urgent, stick that to the side, and then go through it later, so that you have clarity. Another one is your car. I've been in some people's cars, in the back seat, it's like an archaeological dig. You can tell when they were at the beach because that was the week between the two Time magazines where their wet bathing suit is, see? And then on top of that, there was a layer of newspaper from March 1st, and on top of that, there was pizza, so I know they had pizza somewhere between March 1st and March 3rd, where the next newspaper was. And then there's toys and dog bones and empty beer cans, and it's amazing. And when you get into a car like that, what do you think that car is yelling back to you about your self-esteem? See, if you rented a limousine from the limousine service here in Chicago, and they showed up with a car like that, you wouldn't feel like they were doing their job. See, limousines are clean, and it's nice, and it smells good, and the seats are either polished leather or nice vacuum velour, whatever it is. And so we expect that, but we don't give that to ourselves. A friend of mine once said, you train other people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. See, my friend Martin Root treats himself like a first-class act. He always stays in the best hotel room, buys the best food, and Martin's not particularly wealthy. He may not have a lot of suits, but the few suits he has are $800 wool suits, tailor-made. We go out to dinner, he only wants to go where there's really good food. It's going to be healthy, nutritious, well-prepared, well-presented. So when Martin comes to visit me, guess what? I clean up the house. I make sure if he's staying in our guest room that everything is clean, because I know Martin expects that, because that's the way he treats himself. Whereas I've got other friends who show up, you know, in old blue jeans with holes in them and T-shirts that don't look like they've been washed for a couple of weeks, and they say they're coming over. No problem. Come on over. Don't need to clean up for them. Now, I'm not saying that cleanliness versus uncleanliness or being an anal compulsive retentive type versus, you know, being free and loose. I'm just talking about a level at which your environment supports you rather than pulls energy away from you. Let me share with you a little technique in terms of papers. The average American these days handles about 600 pounds of paper a year. Now, those of us that work in organizations and corporations handle probably another couple tons. But anyway, I got this mail, it comes in all the time, things that people want me to do, brochures and so forth, and I start piling them up, and pretty soon I have this big mess again. So I learned something called the 3-basket system, and it works like this. I want to recommend this to everybody, whether you're in business or just in your home. You get 3 stack baskets, 3 little stack trays, and one says in, the other says pending, the other says out. Now, so far, that's not so new. What's new is using it. Everything that comes into your space, whether it's your home, like, you know, mail or junk or books, whatever, goes in the in basket. And then what you do is once a day, you go through your in basket, and you keep going through it until everything is out of your in basket. Your in basket must be empty before the end of the day. It's a rule. Don't go to bed if you have to stay up till 1 in the morning. In basket gets emptied out. Then everything that comes out of the in basket has the following rules attached to it. If it can be done in 10 minutes, you do it now. If it's a phone call, make the call. If it's to answer the memo, answer the memo. If it's a request for information, write it back on that memo, send it back out in the out basket. If it requires you to get up and walk across the hall, do it now. Don't say, oh, I'll do all my hall stuff later. See, you take each one. If it's to Xerox something, go Xerox it, come back, stick it in an envelope, it's handled. And you just go down through the pile one thing at a time. What do most people do? They take everything out of the box. Well, this is the important stuff, this is the junky stuff, this is the whatever. Then they take the middle stuff and the junky stuff and they set it aside and they work on the important stuff. And after a couple months, you have 8 feet of middle and junky stuff that's never been handled. So if it can be handled within 10 minutes, do it now. If it takes more than 10 minutes to do it, then you make one of the following 3 decisions. And you can make this decision about the 10-minute stuff too. You either do it, delegate it, or dump it. It's what we call the 3 Ds. So you do it, you delegate it to someone else. You say, look, I don't have to do this. My secretary can handle this. I don't need to do this. I could probably get my older son to do this. I don't need to do this. I can ship this off to the marketing department. Let them handle it. Write a little note, stick it in your outbox. Dump it means, this would be a good thing to do, but I don't have time. It's not a high priority. Trash can it. What most people do is they say, well, maybe someday. And then pretty soon you got your whole life piled up with maybe some days. If it's something you're going to do, but it takes 3 hours to do, like, write that report or gather some data that you have to go to the library for, and drive halfway across town. Then what you do, anything like that, you put it in the pending files. And you never have more than 6 pending files. And let me explain that. In a business or in your life, you should only have 6 functions. More than that, and you're doing too much. You'll get overloaded and you'll never succeed. You'll be burned out. Give you an example of what mine are. I have a file that says seminars and speeches. So if one of the pieces is a little story I want to learn to tell in my speech, it goes in my seminar and speeches file. Another one says books and tapes. So if I think, gee, I'm going to write that, I'm going to use that for my next tape album, it goes in my books and tapes file. Marketing. Here's an idea of how to sell more. Here's a place I could get a speaking job. Then I have one that says company improvement. I'm the president of the company. So here's something I can do in terms of investing our income better. Anything related to that goes in there. Then finally, I have a thing called personal, like send Oren a birthday card. That's my son. Write a thank you note to your mom, that kind of stuff. Cash a check. Pick up groceries on the way home. Now, what I then do is after I finish going through my inbox and everything is out of that, it's either now in the outbox, it's in the trash can, or it's in my pending file, right? Then I take and I say, of all the things I could do right now, what area of my life do I want to work on? Well, I say marketing. So now I pull out my marketing file. And I go through my file and I order every piece of paper in there from top to bottom, from what's most important to be done to what's least important to be done. What do I do now? I take that file and I put it away and I only take that one piece of paper out. Now that's what I work on until I'm done. I handle it and then I take out that file, I take the next piece of paper out. When you're putting stuff in your pending files, you always write on that piece of paper, what's the next action step that you can take that will move that forward? Now, as soon as I've written down what's the next thing, see, I can put it in my pending file. So when I take out my piece of paper from my pending file, guess what? I know exactly what I need to do. I don't need to think about it. I don't have to waste time with it. I know exactly the next thing to do. See, and life moves forward simply by doing one thing at a time. And usually what happens, we look at a project, there's so many things to do, what do? We get overwhelmed and we don't do any of them. You can only do one thing at a time. See, and then my life starts to be orderly. And I get completion. What I have is 12 folders that say January, February, March, April, etc. And if I don't think I'm going to get to this until August, I don't want it in my file bothering me every day until August shows up. Someone once said, success by the inch is a cinch, by the yard it's hard. If you break down these big tasks into little tiny steps and do them, you can make some real progress in your life. Let's look at another area of incompletion. It's called broken agreements. How many of you have made agreements with people in your life that you still haven't kept? Anyone out there? Most of the hands up. Every broken agreement is an incompletion. Well, it blocks your energy, and it blocks the relationship, cuts off the trust that you have with that person, and undermines your self-esteem because you don't feel like a person of integrity. So what you need to do where you have a broken agreement is, first of all, there are 3 steps. The first one is acknowledge that you have a broken agreement. The second step is to apologize. And the third step is to either recreate the agreement, complete it, or renegotiate and tell the person you don't intend to complete it, so now you don't have an incomplete anymore. Because I've said, I'm not going to do it, you know it, I know it, that's it. So I would suggest to make a list of everyone you have a broken agreement with and then write them or call them and clean it up. You'd be surprised how good you'll feel about yourself, how free you'll feel, and you'll have all those attention units available. Another one is any acknowledgements that you haven't given to people. Like I haven't acknowledged my secretary for the great job she's been doing the last month, new person on the job. Or I haven't acknowledged my son for bringing his grade point average up from C to B+. Everyone that's contributed to me and that I haven't acknowledged them for it usually isn't incomplete. When they see me, they're kind of waiting. Do you ever do something for your boss and then they never acknowledge what a good job you did? And every time you see them, you're kind of wondering, is today the day they're going to mention it? Right? Should I mention it? Should I hint around about it? How come they don't notice these things? So acknowledgement is a big incompletion. I have a friend, Dave Tansey, who's a professional speaker and an educator, used to be a superintendent of schools, and he tells a story about when he was at UCLA as an undergraduate, he wanted to go out for basketball because he wanted to meet John Wooden, who was one of the great basketball coaches of all time at UCLA. And Dave was not a great basketball player, but he went out along with 200 other kids, and the team gets whittled down to about, 30, 40 players. And what happened was, at the end of the tryouts, Wooden would get the kids in groups of 5, and they'd be sitting around all across the gym, and he would go over to each kid with his clipboard, and he would tell the kid what he saw his strengths are, what he saw his weaknesses were, and then he would give him some advice, like basketball isn't for you, but don't give up, try some other sports, or if you come back next year and you work all summer in a basketball league, I think you can make the team. You need to work on your dribbling, you need to work on your foul shooting. 200 kids, he had notes like that, kids that he'd probably never see again in his life. And Dave was one of the guys that got cut, but as he told him, as he was cutting him, he said, look, I can really tell you love to play sports. You are really into basketball. You have so much fire and get up and go and competitive spirit, and you're willing to really go for it, and you got guts. He says, make sure you find a sport. There are 180 different teams on UCLA, athletic teams, varsity teams. Find one, because we deserve to have you playing for our university. Well, this blew him away. Here he was getting cut, and he said he walked away from it feeling like I was esteemed. And he said, I realized about 20 years later that I'd never thanked John Wooden. He did get a varsity letter, I think it was in wrestling or track or something like that, and when they had the varsity letter day, Wooden came up to him 3 years after this basketball event, never seen the kid since then, and said, I'm glad you found another sport, good for you. Remembered him 3 years later. And this built his self-esteem like you couldn't believe. And he said he wrote a letter to John Wooden, 3 pages, thanking him, telling him that he enjoyed him as a basketball coach and how he loved UCLA, but most importantly, he remembered these events and what a meaningful difference it had made in his life. 2 weeks later, he gets a letter from John Wooden saying, your letter came at the most incredible time. I was feeling down. I wasn't feeling very good about myself. And when I got your letter, it meant so much to me. Thank you. And he wrote him a 2-page letter about what was going on in his life and what it was like to be a coach and on and on. That's the power of acknowledgement. So make sure you reach out and acknowledge the people in your life. Okay, let's look at the second area of incompletion. It's called healing the negative past. Healing the negative past. I've mostly shared with you how to do that already. The total truth process, where you share your anger, your hurt, your fear, and your regrets and your I wants, and the I love you and appreciation stage. Anything where you have emotional hurt from the past, there's always a person involved. Sometimes it may be even with God. You're angry at God, so then do the total truth with God. Do it with yourself, whatever's there. But use that process. And if there's guilt and resentment from the past, use what we talked about earlier. Change your belief or change your action. Let it go. Otherwise, you're dragging an anchor around. Any of you had that feeling where you're driving a car and you look down and the emergency brake's on? Any of you ever done that? How many of you, when you do that, instead of letting the emergency brake go, just push harder on the gas? That's crazy. We wouldn't do that, would we? What do? You release the brake. And so all this emotional baggage that we're carrying around from the past is like dragging an anchor. And we need to let it go. We need to forgive and forget and heal. Give yourself permission to be in therapy, to go to counseling, to be in groups, to use 12-step programs, whatever it takes to let go of that emotional baggage. In America right now, the term that's very popular is we're all in denial. We deny that we have pain. We deny, who, me? No problem. What are these anchors I've been dragging around? Oh, I've been dragging around them for years. No problem. I can handle it. I'm tough. Well, I'm macho. I can take it. Well, there's a point at which you break. So make sure you heal and let go. The next stage is what we call acknowledge the positive past. And this is what I want to focus on mostly here now. Acknowledging the positive past. There's some very powerful techniques. The first one is called the daily review. Each day, before you go to sleep, you can be lying in bed, sitting in a chair, close your eyes, and review the day. Now, how to do that? Ask your unconscious to bring up memories and pictures of things in the day that you can feel proud about, successes. Maybe you're on a diet and you cheat a little bit, but you didn't cheat all the way. You got up, you went to work, you made that scary phone call, you asked for a raise when it was difficult, you helped out a friend, you went to the gym, you worked out, you spent time with your children, quality time. I don't know if you know this, but in America, the average parent only spends between 12.5 and 14.5 minutes per day interacting with each of their children. And that between 8.5 and 12.5 of those minutes are spent arguing about bedtime, eating habits, haircuts, dress codes, all that kind of stuff. Leaves between 2 and 6 minutes a day for the development of values, self-esteem, sharing love, listening, talking about feelings. So we need to spend time reviewing the day, and when we've done stuff with our kids, give yourself acknowledgement for that. Spend 20 minutes with your kid, you're way above the American average. Okay? Now what happens when you're doing this daily review, you'll start to see things, all kinds of stuff that you never would have normally congratulated yourself for. Another way you can use the daily review is to ask yourself, show me places in the day where I could improve. Oh yeah, the time I screamed at my secretary, the time I got angry at the traffic, the time I yelled at my son. Don't feel guilty about that. See that as an improvement opportunity. Okay? Because what we want to do is build up that stack of poker chips we were talking about before, focusing on our successes and then focusing on possibilities of improvement. Another technique is called the mirror exercise. Now this is different from the one I taught you earlier. Before you go to bed at night, stand in front of your mirror. Now, if you have a full-length mirror, that's great. If you've only got a little bathroom mirror, you know, up on the medicine cabinet, that's fine too. And you're going to talk to yourself. And you're going to say the following things. You're going to tell yourself what you appreciate, admire, and respect about you from the day. And at the end, you're going to say, I love you. Now, for some people, that's extremely uncomfortable. Now, what I would recommend, if you're living with someone, make sure you tell them you're doing this. The last thing you want them to do is walk into the bathroom and there you are talking to the mirror. You know, they'll send for the little people in the white coats to come get you. Let me give you an example of what it might sound like if I were doing it. Hi, Jack. You had a great day today. Really proud of you. You got up early in the morning, and even though you had a full day ahead of you, you got up and you got some exercise, and then you did some stretching, and you meditated for 15 minutes. You ate a really balanced, healthy breakfast, and you came down and you worked with the group all day, and you were really present with them, and you did a good job. You articulated yourself better than you usually do. You said less gonnas, and you said more going tos. I was proud of you for that. And then you got together with some other people, and you went out for dinner, and you ate well. You stayed on your diet. And when you came home, you called your children, and you talked to them, which I'm really proud of you for that, because that's important in our life. And one more thing I want to tell you. I really love you. And then you hold eye contact with yourself. And that's really hard for a lot of people. They want to go, I really love you. And then they kind of look away. Or I really love you. And then they kind of run as fast as they can because they don't want to look. Really get to know that person in the mirror. Make eye contact. Go deep into those eyes. First time I did this exercise, I was in a group and I was asked to do it for 3 months and not to miss a day. So I did it for 3 months. And about 2 months into it, a really weird thing happened. I'm talking in the mirror, and all of a sudden I said, I love you. And I had this weird feeling come over me, like my skin got all tingly and I felt warm and my stomach felt hollow. And the feeling was kind of like what I felt when I got a crush on Judy Graham back in high school. Or when I first met my wife, Georgia, and our eyes met. And it was like love at first sight. And I thought, my God, I've gone too far. You know? I said, I think I have a crush on myself. You know, this is bad news.
Oh, good news.
So I went to my wife, Georgia, who I mentioned as a counselor, and I said, Georgia, I think I've blown it. You know, I think I've done this thing too far. I have this crush on me. I mean, I'm getting into narcissism or something. She said, Jack, don't worry about it. She said, that's what you're supposed to feel. It's okay to love yourself that much. This was a totally new experience, you know, because I was brought up, you didn't love yourself. You know, that was bad. So don't be surprised if when you're doing this you cry, if you shake, if you feel nauseous, if you feel silly or giddy, all those kind of things can show up for you. One person told me they started doing this and all of a sudden they stopped and the person in the mirror, I mean it was their own voice, said, well, it's about time you told me something nice. So give yourself that possibility.
This is the end of side 6. Please fast forward the tape to cue up side 5 for your next listening.